Hey everyone.
Evening, how you doing?
Needham Shannon.
Duncan,
Here, right?
I don't hear anybody.
you guys
We're
can.
good.
There we go.
Colin is,
I'll check my mic.
No, Justin.
okay. Paul Malta,
Here. For some reason, the room keeps on getting muted.
This red button just went on. Is anybody hitting the mute button?
I think it's good now.
okay.
I was trying to silence my own mic on my computer, but I think
Okay.
it's working.
It seems better.
Shane is present online. Hi Shane.
Hi, everyone.
And Gus Drayson is also present at the table, pending, a member pending his select board appointment. And so the first order of business is to approve the minutes from September 9th, 2024. Has everyone reviewed it? And are there any questions or comments?
Move approval.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Chair votes aye. Duncan,
Duncan, can you hear us?
Can you approve the
Duncan.
minutes?
Can do it in chat. Can they indicate in chat?
Paul, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, all right, just move.
Paul,
Yeah, aye.
aye, okay,
That's Duncan.
Duncan,
Duncan.
gives a thumbs up. And Stephen, you're gonna abstain?
I'll abstain.
Okay. And so the motion passes. Next, next order of business is to introduce new members. Stephen Frail is a new member, a Climate Action Committee appointee. And yeah, you wanna introduce yourself? No? Okay. All right.
You guys know me. Looking
Glad
forward,
to have you here.
Welcome.
Yeah.
looking forward to working here.
A lot of work you did on the Climate Action Committee. We like to have you do here too, so got a lot done there and appreciate that. Gus was introduced before last week, our last meeting by Justin when he was here, but officially appointed here, just waiting for the select board to put that through.
Thank you very much for the welcome.
Yeah.
I've been a few years now on the Transportation Safety Committee and doing work, lots of detail work, safety, and focus on keeping traffic moving, keep the residents safe, and keep a continued focus on the various modes of transportation in town.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think I mentioned before, but work with the Brookline Transportation Committees. We spoke a little bit about that and hoping to
Sure.
get some of that information. Yeah, for us. It's great. So the next one is the 2024 construction season wrap up and three. Tyler.
Yeah, so just wanted to do a bit of a debrief. We just are completing now the final work of the 2024 construction season with pavement markings remaining on Webster Street. The long lines on Webster Street were painted earlier this week overnight, so only the handwork remains, which involves the continental crosswalks going across the raised crosswalks, as well as some of the other crosswalks along the corridor and the more detailed work that will be completed on Sunday night. With that, that'll be officially the last item of business for the construction season. We covered a lot of ground this summer, which was great to see, great to experience for my first year in the role, but also pretty stressful. So I'm glad to see that everything came out nicely. A couple of the projects that were on our list at the beginning of the season were delayed to 2025 for capacity or budget reasons. So some of those projects you'll see on the 2025 plan for next construction season. We tried a couple different new things this summer, including raised crosswalks as a traffic calming strategy, sort of a continued and expanded use of curb extensions and bump outs to calm traffic speeds as well. And then on the maintenance side of things, we piloted what's called a Cape Seal for the first time in town on residential roads, specifically Country Way and the associated side streets over there, where the rubber chip pavement sealant was topped with a micro surface treatment to create a double seal. That is a technique that is gaining popularity in the pavement condition management industry. So we'll be looking forward to seeing how that performs as we go forward. In the case of Country Way, it was sort of a unorthodox combination because the rubber chip was applied in the previous season and then the microsurfacing was applied on top. But then we also on Trout Pond Lane, we did both in the same season this year as well as a test to see how it performs. So some new things, a lot of work, but we're pretty satisfied with the way things came out. We had a lot of funds that were sort of in reserve over the last few years that we certainly put to good use, and we expended in anticipation of not having that same allotment for this fiscal year. So as we look forward to 2025, some of the scope of our work, although it seems like a lot on the page because there's a lot of individual streets, in terms of dollars, it'll be a little bit less because we're not working with our full capital allotment to supplement our operating expenses. So there's a couple of projects on the 2025 list that will be utilizing Chapter 90 funds from the state. We leveraged some state money in this season as well on Dedham Avenue through their municipal pavement program, which allowed us to accomplish more work than we typically would be able to with our capital allotment. So some of the projects upcoming that will be done in that way are a project on the southern end of Webster Street, beyond Dedham Avenue going south. There are some sidewalk challenges there, but we've been holding off the pavement resurfacing for a few years now, and it really needs some attention. So we'll be utilizing Chapter 90 funds and bidding that out as a separate project rather than using our on-call contractors.
Sorry. The rest of Webster Street, we got money from.
Eversource. Which,
They also tore up this section of the road too, so is there any money coming from them for this section again, or is that like a one?
you talking about this year or previous years?
Next year, I mean, this year they paid for, or there was money coming in for Webster Street, right?
Yeah,
But they also tore up this part of Webster Street, so is there,
south of
additional-
Dedham.
yes,
So they did do some work on, like, the side streets, Larkspur, the extent of the work was not similar in scope to the work that was done on the northern. We also expect that Eversource will do some additional work on the northern end beyond the project limits from this year. Some additional gas work in the next few years, but we don't yet have the limits on that. The way that it's working is that Eversource will give us in-kind funds if our program already plans on doing a resurfacing in that area in the following year. So otherwise, they're responsible for permanent repair, permanent trench repair, as a condition of their street permit. So we do have Eversource funds that we received from some other locations, including for a couple of these streets on the 2025 list, Damon, Tanglewood, Hollow Ridge, Pythias. Those are all streets off of Parish Road by the cemetery. We're receiving some funds for that work, and we also received some funds for some locations that we did this year on Sunnyside Road and Nichols Road.
What's happening on the latter streets?
That's also gas work, so that, because of some utility concerns, we asked them to keep the majority of the work to be contained to the sidewalk. And that sidewalk will be restored to its original condition.
They've got the streets, some of them blocked.
Yeah, there's, because of the smaller width of the roadway and some of the equipment that they're using, it's not always possible to keep a lane open, so for safety reasons, they block off the street sometimes.
Are all of the latter streets being done or just the ones that are underway now?
Just the ones that are underway now.
Okay, and two other quick questions, one of which I think you answered. This was a particularly heavy roadway repair and resurfacing year, correct? I mean, I've been here a long time. I've never seen this much work.
Yeah, so because we had the major projects on Webster and Dedham in the same year, it was definitely challenging logistically. Particularly because we had to work around school on
Right.
Webster Street.
Mhm.
And Dedham Ave had the involvement of the state as well, so there was all sorts of strings attached to that.
Yeah.
But I would not expect as large of a scope of work in the next couple of years.
My last question is on the 25 plan, when it says sidewalk both sides, is that replacing the sidewalk on both sides?
Correct. Rehabilitation of the sidewalk.
Okay, that's great. I live on one of those streets. I'm happy to see it.
Yeah.
Is this new gas service or upgrading, improving the existing gas service on those roads?
So that. I'm sorry, Duncan's trying to. Duncan, did you?
I may have resolved my issue.
Okay,
Can I slip a question in?
yeah, let me just answer Stephen's question first
Yeah.
and then we'll.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
So I was wondering if the gas projects, is that existing service that's being repaired or is it new service that's being on those streets by Eversource?
I believe it's existing service.
I would think so. I mean, most of the town has one.
There's still some pockets there.
Yeah, that's one of the more densely populated areas in town, which is one of the reasons why we are looking at sidewalk rehabilitation on both sides of the street. That is sort of an exception to our developing strategy of seeing where sidewalks are redundant on both sides, but because of the proximity to the schools and how closely together how densely settled that particular area is, we're opting for both sides. It'll also help us to reduce our footprint because say we were doing one side, the original plan called for doing one side of the street with sidewalks, but for 3 or 4 of those ladder streets at the same time. We decided that we'll reduce the number of streets, but do both sides of the sidewalk.
And it's- Sorry,
yeah.
I don't mean to harp, some of those sidewalks are concrete and some asphalt and some are a mixture of both. Are you gonna be replacing concrete sidewalks with concrete, or are we gonna remove the concrete and do asphalt sidewalks?
So that's yet to be determined. We will have if we choose to go to asphalt, we'll have a neighborhood meeting to discuss it. I know it's a sensitive issue. We do want to move towards a consistent material for the length of the street. It's some of the roads on those ladder streets are half and half, or there's a mixture. For safety and aesthetic reasons, for maintenance reasons, we'd like them to be consistent material. But that hasn't been determined.
Is one better than the other?
Asphalt's easier to maintain, people like concrete more.
Which one is
That's
more
the-
root resistant?
More what?
Root resistance.
Believe it or not, asphalt is, it can move, exactly. So the concrete panels, when there's pressure exerted in the middle of the panel, they'll crack. Or you'll see significant heaving versus, asphalt will, it's easier for us to repair. If there's a, sidewalk, a concrete sidewalk that's in need of repair, a lot of times we are forced to use asphalt to repair it.
Yeah.
So I know it's, we're not committing to either side at the moment.
Is that within the scope of our design guide,
I was just gonna ask that.
asphalt type and?
So I think that's more of a. It's like a policy question, but I don't know, it's not like tied to. Maybe it is, the classification of road as much. What we've always done historically is concrete is only for high pedestrian traffic areas, commercial and downtown and Chestnut, and Knights, so kind of the spine of the. Though those particular ladder streets have kind of been the exception in the past. You don't see a lot of concrete in other areas unless they were private developments that got accepted into the public way. Network.
When they lift, there were significant pedestrian hazards, especially for elderly people.
Concrete, yeah. Yeah, so it's, if we choose to go to asphalt, it'll be, it'll have to be a discussion with the residents. Duncan?
Yeah, thanks. I just, Webster Street was mentioned. Looks like it's coming along very well. I'm just wondering, I think that maybe the signal timing issue may not, it may not have been worked out yet, but it does seem observationally that, noon to mid-afternoon and on, Saturdays midday, Webster seems to be doing a lot better than, Dedham Avenue at this point. And I'm just kind of curious, or rather Great Plain, I'm sorry, Great Plain and Webster. It seems to be a lot more queuing on Great Plain than there might have been. And, a fair amount of green time getting awarded north-south on Webster that, might contribute to that being a more attractive route in a way. I just don't know. I'm just curious whether people are, there's still effort ahead on that. I assume that the way it's sitting now is not the final configuration.
So we haven't modified the signal phasing.
Yeah.
As part of the project. I can certainly look into the phasing and make sure that it's operating as designed. Can you send me an email on that and then I can bring it?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I'll do that.
Any questions about this past year's work? Before we quickly go over
I do actually have a question about Webster and one of the crosswalks at May. the lights, the light is single. I've noticed quite a bit cars taking left off of May onto Webster. Will not notice that signal. So someone will be in the crosswalk. The cars will stop on Webster.
Hmm.
And the car coming off of May will think they're being waved through. And will hit the gas and go right through the crosswalk.
Hmm.
So several times we've stopped because we noticed that the driver was not looking at us, they were looking at the two drivers going. And they passed through, so I don't know if there's anything that can be done about that. I don't know if it's the positioning of it right on the corner that makes it harder for that person to see it, if there's no. Signal on May Street that they see, like the May Street person doesn't see the lights until they come around the corner. But it's something that I've noticed enough that I think it might be a safety hazard.
It's a very difficult intersection.
Is it new? Is it new, this project?
That light is new.
That light is this year, right?
Flashing light.
The flashing light was this year.
Not at May Street, that was installed as a. part
Oh,
of
was
Previous project.
previous project, okay.
The no are the RFB beacons, the push button signals. We didn't install any of those on the Webster Street project this year.
Okay.
All the ones that are there were put in as part of a previous project that was a spin-off of the pedestrian safety audit that was conducted in 2017. So I think that particular one has been there for.
Yeah, it has been a couple of
3 years or so. Something like that, but I think we can definitely take a look at it and see if maybe it's something that we can address through some kind of warning sign or.
On May, you're.
On May
Like
Street.
Right,
facing the car that would be waiting to turn.
right, right.
Justin would probably.
That's a
If
very.
Justin was here, he would definitely have an opinion. Maybe that can be referred to the Transportation Safety Committee.
I could send it over to Justin. Who's the chair of it?
Justin.
Justin's the chair. I could send it to
You
Justin.
get people frustrated coming from May to Webster.
Yeah,
It's a difficult, that left turn from May to Webster is very hard.
yeah.
So that's extra dangerous with respect to people in the crosswalk if they don't see a flag.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. I think maybe, I'll have to look at it in the field. I don't know if there's any like obstruction on the left. Like if you're sitting there waiting to turn, if the sign on the flashing sign is visible.
It is visible. It's just,
But
I
you're
think
looking
attention.
at the
I think it's
traffic,
just the attention.
attention.
They're looking at the vehicles, not,
Looking
not
at the cars,
light.
I use
Yeah.
that a lot and I notice it's.
So maybe
Scary.
there has to be something opposite the side street.
Hey, I'll send it to Justin.
Okay, yeah, and then, Gus is also on the committee too, so. We can discuss.
So I,
Yeah.
on, Dedham, I think. Webster, there was discussion about changing the speed limit on Dedham Ave.
Yes. So engineering has been hard at work trying to. Get that implemented as soon as possible. We've been working with MassDOT. Initially, they told us that we wouldn't be able to actually post a changed speed limit without, we were trying to work through the process and it seems for a minute that we would have to actually do it with a end speed zone, start speed, because the speed zone is the 40 mile an hour. So we would do it that way, but then we talked more to the state and basically they told us, as long as we can give them traffic data, which we were planning to do anyway after the project was completed to show the difference in speed from before and after, that they will take into account the context of the road when determining if they will allow us to lower the speed limit. Previously, we were trying to do a workaround because we thought that if we did a speed study and it showed that the 85th percentile speed was appropriate for the 40, that we would not be able to change it. But we were, in the last few years, MassDOT has become more sensitive to sort of the efforts to enhance safety through reducing speed limits, and they've taken into account context like there's a park next to it, there's a school nearby. These are things that they can use to justify a speed limit change, so. It's still happening,
Okay,
still happening, as is the safety zone on Webster Street. The. The traffic calming elements that we included as part of that project were basically a prerequisite for establishing a safety zone as we planned. So that'll be a rather than just a school, school timed speed limit change, that would be year round safety zone,
What's the issue?
25, so.
What's the issue here?
Speed limits on.
On what,
Yeah,
May and
Webster.
Webster, May and Webster, sorry.
well, this one is.
Yeah,
different,
Webster.
yeah, different, yeah, yeah, Webster.
No, I know, yeah.
Dedham Ave and then Webster.
Yeah, behind.
And how about feedback on the raised crossings?
So we've had a lot of positive feedback on the raised crosswalks.
Oh, okay.
I think people were pleased at the profile
Mhm.
because
Okay.
it's not too severe, but it's definitely noticeable. We have had a lot of comments about the bike lanes and not having them as dedicated as part of the project. I've had a lot of discussion with residents on that. And I've explained in other meetings as well that this particular corridor, we were looking at traffic calming from a pedestrian safety enhancement perspective. And there's no reason why we couldn't include bike lanes in the future. But because of the raised crosswalks, it's sort of a little bit of an extra challenge to get. You can't really paint a dedicated bike lane over a speed bump, or you can, but it's not really advisable, so. But people, I think, once the lines are fully painted, I think people thought that the shoulder was a bike lane, and then they were concerned that because the shoulder disappears at the portions that have the expanded medians, that we were creating an unsafe condition, but there wasn't a dedicated bike lane there before, and there isn't now. If people choose to ride in the shoulder, then they're perfectly, able to do that, but for this particular corridor, with all the planned bike and dedicated improvements that we're planning for Highland Avenue, we see that as a preferable north-south spine for the bike network.
I regularly ride my bike down the road and it's marginally better than it was before. Definitely feels a little bit better the way it is now, so it's.
Yeah, and
The traffic calming itself works in a way. The cars are definitely moving slower.
yeah,
Those periods, and there are, there's space in certain spots. Cars can pass you in the torpedo area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yep. I also a behavioral change for people that live right in that area. It'll take some time to adjust behavior. If you're used to driving at a certain speed every day, going up and down the road, eventually you sort of mold yourself to the conditions at hand rather than muscle memory.
Can you just remind us why long-term Highland Avenue is the preferred bike route to Webster? It's obviously much more trafficked and busy and so forth.
With the parking on the sides and people crossing, it's a mess.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
So there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that there is fewer trucks, less truck volume on Highland Avenue than there is on Webster Street,
Really?
yes.
Wow, that's surprising to me.
Yeah, it has to do with the proximity to the getting on and off the highway. People, the trucks are kind of using it as a cut through where they don't have to hit the lights.
I see.
On Highland Avenue, there are some parking areas, but the design will account for that by either modifying the parking, having the bike lane go behind the parked cars up onto the sidewalk, or some other strategy to we're not gonna have bike lanes go straight into a parking lane. There's also just more traffic control in general along Highland. It's not as residential. So that, and it also has more connections to other places that we plan to put bike lanes,
Mhm.
so.
The fact that it's less residential does not seem to be a plus for biking, but
I think that
From.
for a transportation, like using your bike to go to the bus store or.
Right,
you
do
know,
errands and so forth, yeah.
Highland Ave is the spine of the town,
Right.
basically, and everything exists there, so I think there's, you know, the Highland Ave tip project is probably gonna include, hopefully, you know,
Bike infrastructure.
the safest kind, you know,
Mhm.
raised, separated,
Yeah.
sidewalk level, all of these other things, that there really isn't space for
Mhm,
on Webster Street necessarily, or elsewhere.
mhm.
It's more of an urban context than, you know, like the residential, and that's, you know. If it's down, if we have the money from the state to do that,
Right.
and we can, you know, invest in having the bike infrastructure there.
Mhm.
It really becomes a way to transverse across town on a bicycle.
Right.
Opposed to maybe being on, you know,
Or-
like Webster Street, where you may end up. In a lane that's just on the side of the road,
Mhm, mhm.
but on Highland Ave, it may be a
Separated.
little bit more protected.
There's more room to keep people safe at Highland.
It's a bigger project, right?
It's a bigger project, it'll have more funding, we'll be able to do more with the cross section than we would on Webster.
Okay,
Um,
makes sense.
Paul, did you have a question?
I was just curious if we thought there was any chance, I'm just sort of thinking about the ballot initiatives this year and I know that in 2023 there was an attempt to get speed cameras legalized. I don't know, do we think that that is something that we could try to form a coalition around with towns and try to build momentum on that in terms of adding that as a tool to the tool belt for traffic calming?
Are you talking about like enforcement, like some getting ticketed from a camera or?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I haven't been part of those conversations, I think it would definitely be a, effort with police and. I know that the previous town engineer was very much against cameras generally, but we have a new regime now. It could be that there's more of an appetite for it, it's definitely something that the residents would have an opinion on as well, so.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I
Not-
wouldn't,
not opposed.
I wouldn't expect otherwise, but I mean, it kind
Yeah.
of seems like, if, we do as much as we can through urban design, right? But I think ultimately there needs to be a stick
Yeah.
involved. Um,
So I don't believe it's allowed, right? The state does not. allow
right,
it.
it's not allowed. Yeah, there was
Not allowed.
an attempt I think in 2023 to introduce a bill that would allow communities over a certain population threshold to install, I think it was just one camera. But
Yeah, I mean, previously we had to persuade people that even just to put up traffic detection cameras, so.
Yeah.
It might be a little bit of a, but I'm not categorically opposed.
But it would have to be passed at the
Right.
state, legalized, and then we'd
Right.
have to opt to it.
Right,
Probably
so
multi-year
that,
effort.
not in the short term.
yeah, 100%, yeah. I'm just bet the ballot questions are on my mind.
Yeah. Okay, any thing jump out at people from 2025? I don't wanna spend all of our times. This year,
We can kind of, if we can mix it into the next,
okay,
Stephen and Gus, we spoke a few meetings ago about a item that was referred to us from the select board about creating a bike map. And I think we had consensus that we would take that on. And determine kind of where it would be appropriate to add bike infrastructure, and where to direct that bike traffic and use them. So we haven't really discussed it beyond talking about, we will do it. But I see this opportunity, as I did last year, when you see the list of streets of where they might make sense. So I think the discussion, we kind of need to have is how do we get to that point? How do we develop our list and
Mhm.
Is there,
how do we get there?
is there scope in terms of, when you say bike pathways, are we talking about just hard protected bike lanes, or is there soft infrastructure that's included in that as well? Could be signs, Shero.
I think it's everything.
It's everything, the whole tool.
The bike map, how we integrate it into, the construction planning. I think that the kind of low hanging fruit
Yeah.
is some of these roads that it fits
Mhm.
and, getting the bike infrastructure on those roads as they're being renovated, on the yearly process.
Yep, the only thing I would say about that is that. Certain, a lot of locations would require some engineering advisement to be able to lay out the bike lanes. So for the more complicated ones, one of my priorities that I'm looking forward to the next year is Harris Avenue. I would, previously, there was an attempt to design some bike lanes on Harris Avenue that kind of floundered because it ran into some issues with schools, pickup and drop off. That's something that would require us to work with a designer to figure out how we can work around that problem. On other streets, it might just be a matter of in-house engineering, helping us lay out in the field widths. Doing an in-house design. That's something that they should be able to help us with. But for the more complicated ones, it might require some funding to design.
Years and years ago, I think it was probably in the early 2010s, a group called Needham Bikes was formed. Tad Staley was very active in it. And I believe they actually produced a bike map. I mean, very elementary and nothing actually on the roads, but you know, good routes for bikes in town. I can probably dig that up or get it from Tad, and it could be helpful as one of the starting points. Because some folks already, you know, thought about it.
I think we have,
Are they still active?
I don't think so.
they're not active.
Oh, they are?
We have, used that map.
Oh, you have,
I think
okay.
we sent it to the MAPC for our,
Oh, that map was sent? Okay, I didn't realize that.
I think we probably sent it at one point maybe, but I think
It might
it's,
have
I
been
think
on
it's
LinkedIn
in there. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but, cause that's like a user sourced, like.
Yes,
You know, this is a good
exactly.
way to go, right?
Yeah, but
The
that could be
there's-
informative.
It was. That bicycle plan was voted in some, I don't know, select board signed it in, but it's actual bicycle plan
Yeah.
that map has been made of.
Okay.
That was adopted by either the traffic safety committee or transportation or the
You're
select
talking
board.
about the one that's
The Needham
20 years
bicycle
old?
plan, yeah, it's 20 years old.
Oh, it's 20, not 15, okay.
Yeah, so it, and it has a lot of the streets that were on there, have been completed. They have bike lanes on them now.
Oh, okay.
Greendale was on there and Central Ave, and so a lot of that was already done.
Great.
Harris Ave, was on that list as well.
Yeah, and it's also on our complete streets.
On the complete streets list, yeah. I mean, I also see like, you know, Great Plain Ave is really probably a big one there, and it's also on all of those lists.
Yeah, what's section?
From
They are
Harris
some-
Ave to Peacedale,
Yeah,
and, yeah, so I think,
yeah, so that project, which you proposed, a pilot, previously.
Yeah.
That from Harris down to Dedham.
Yeah.
That is one that's gonna require engineering help, because there's parking conflicts, there's the school, I consider it almost like two halves of the same project, right? But that is probably my vote for where to go, with the bike lanes.
At the top of the list, you mean?
Yeah,
Mhm.
a lot of these more local roads, it doesn't really make sense, but that's a
Yeah.
good spot to target, because it is on our lists already.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think maybe the first step is, for those of us that haven't looked at it thoroughly, look at the old plan,
Mhm.
check off ones that we've accomplished. see what we think still makes sense. Maybe there's contextual changes,
Mhm,
um,
mhm,
and then kind of update that.
mhm.
Yeah, I think there's also, like. Some of these fit on a road because the road is a certain width. And so we can kind of like, just based on the numbers. You take all of the 30-foot roads and need them, there aren't, they all probably. Fit in a place that where you would put a bike lane or bike. infrastructure.
Yeah, I'm not saying we would exclude
Well,
like that.
yeah, but I
necessarily.
mean, if you compile that list and, you start from there, you can kind of go through them and say that this one makes sense. The spaces there, they fit. And then when it comes up, almost having a list, so when it comes up.
Mhm.
On your annual thing, on your annual,
Capital plan, yeah.
We're gonna reconstruct the road or renovate it, you can kind of. Put them together and say, okay, is this the time that we're gonna put bike lane here, or is this the time?
Yeah.
That we can't, there's not enough engineering, there's not enough funds for it this year, and it maybe goes to the next one, or.
Yeah, well, that's what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
so.
So what is, if you need to do engineering, how does that impact the budget for the road? Is it what's the factor? Like, is it 1x, 2x, 3x?
So it's drawn from it can be drawn from the same pool of funds. Typically, you would say that. A design, so to give you an idea of the scale of it, so, Webster Street, those traffic calming improvements, were. In the neighborhood of $30,000 to $40,000. And Dedham Avenue, a little bit more towards like 50. So. Depending on how involved the design is and how large of an area you're talking about, it's a matter of tens of thousands. And then, so it's.
Significant.
We have a, engineering has an operating budget that can absorb, like. One or two of those a year. And then the rest would have to come out of our, this money.
Unless you plan ahead enough that you can put it on a warrant for town meeting too.
Yeah, so there's,
You'd have to have a source though.
we actually
You would, but I mean, I think if you put it through the annual budget process, you'd come up with the sources, either from the general fund or
Overlay.
overlay, yeah.
So we did ask, I believe we did ask for more, money in our operating budget for the next fiscal year for that reason.
So one of the thoughts that I had as you were asking me how to get there, one is, I think, having a well. Developed, updated plan, like here's the map and prioritization of what you want to build, and I think some of that needs to be decided, how do you want to prioritize it? Is it routes to schools, routes to parks? Are we thinking about through traffic on bikes, is it commuters getting to western suburbs or getting over 128? I think you'd want to have that map identified and say, here's our tier 1 routes, our tier 2 routes, our tier 3 routes.
Yeah, but that comes in with respect to classification, but we're gonna be talking shortly about that too.
Yes.
So that
Yeah.
ties into that.
Yes,
You
exactly.
know, because if you have we're talking about the bike plan. But what you could do is, let's say, you could have a major arterial bike route, let's say that we're talking about Highland Ave. But you have minor routes, let's say, to school, so which are to the neighborhood, so.
Right.
But by just identify that you have something like a long-term goal where you can pick pieces.
Yeah, so if you have that all well developed and very, the select board adopts it, then you could on an annual basis.
Mhm.
Not just look at the budget that you get annually, but say, hey, there's some special larger projects. You wouldn't want to do just a part of Highland, right? If you're gonna do Highland, you'd probably want to do most of that
Right.
route at the same time, because you don't want a route that goes nowhere.
Yep.
That'd be the worst kind of project. Safe lane that ends in nothing. I mean, we just saw what happened in Memorial Drive, very recently, so.
Yeah, so I think that it really is. integrated and related to the street design guide.
Yes.
project. Yeah. We can sort of. We've talked previously about, we don't necessarily have to wait for that to come through. Before we can start talking about these things, it's just that it's gonna have to be kind of on an ad hoc basis until
Do
we
you
have a larger plan.
Yeah.
I don't think it's. That complicated in Needham, because I don't think there are like. A lot of roads where we need to like add bike lanes to everything.
Right.
And so there are, I think there's a very short list of streets that are, number one, that are wide enough to do it in kind of a cost effective way. And that will make sense as it connects to Highland Ave, as we're using that as our spine, the network. And so little connections to Highland Ave from wherever. I don't think it's that big of a project to come up with
Right.
the streets that it should be.
Mhm.
Right, which is why we're looking at the list and we can.
I think it would be easier if we had the list before we get like the next year's list, to come in to say, okay, here are the ones that we had already earmarked.
Right.
Do we have enough money to do it this year? Maybe we don't, maybe we do.
Yep.
Does it fit in the schedule?
Changing topic a little bit, but we've mentioned Harris Avenue a lot, and this may relate to your work on the climate stuff, Stephen. There are, I don't know, a couple hundred cars that line up to pick up students at 2:30 or whenever it is on Harris every day. I would say, I haven't counted, but 80 to 90% of them have the engines running the whole time they're there. Is there not an anti-idling?
There is.
There is.
Nobody pays attention.
Oh, there is.
It's like the speed limit.
I mean, could we suggest it be enforced for a whole lot of reasons, but mostly climate? I mean, why is, I mean, I
I
We
think,
have to ask the police.
yeah, I think that.
mean, maybe
You
outside of
could-
our
yeah,
purview.
well, I
but-
mean, you can design that in, I think, you know, but you may have to engage like Safe Routes to School with MassDOT to come up with a plan for the school drop off there. But if you eliminate the, like, the areas for cars to pull over and wait and drop off kids, you know, you may be able to get people to just drive there and drop off kids and be safe.
Well, I'm not even
But that would be
suggesting
an
eliminating it.
engineering-
I'm just saying, turn off your engine if you're gonna sit there for half an hour. That seems like a no-brainer.
I
to
think
me.
There's an existing law. it's just
It
not-
works in Switzerland, it doesn't work here.
Well, have we tried enforcing it, I guess is the question.
Um,
And I mean, I'm a resident, I didn't even know about the ordinance or whatever it is.
Well-
I wonder how many people do know. about it.
Maybe there should be a sign posted that says, please turn off your engine.
No,
I mean, that's a simple one. Anyway,
Or get into an EV, then you don't have to worry about it.
Exactly.
well, that's true too. In 20 years, we may get there.
I think it's sort of a community policing question because officers don't want to
Right.
write tickets for.
Can't say
But how about a signage issue? I mean, I like that
I think
idea
that's
as
been
a
in front of
simple.
the TSC too, I wanna say I've seen someone,
It's where?
someone is.
Oh, that the
something to
Transportation Safety
TSC.
Committee? Oh, I don't know.
Something like
Uh,
We had, yeah,
that.
there was,
Or maybe it was on.
we had one petition asking for no idling sign, but
How does one advocate for that?
Public health might be a place to go, because one of the reasons you want the anti-idling is you're sitting there in the school zone pumping carbon monoxide
Yes.
at all the kids. And so you might get the Department of Public Health to figure out, to sponsor or advocate for no idling.
And how about
Just a
the,
couple of
climate change.
observations. One, the town does not respect that law.
it's not a town law?
No,
to state law.
the town
just
vehicles idle.
Okay.
One, two, in the winter, that's the only way to get heat. And if you're sitting there for 20 minutes, nobody's gonna stay cold in their car. And in the summer, it's the air conditioning argument.
Wow.
It's a cultural thing,
It is, I agree, but I'd like to change the culture.
but at least we should post signs.
I agree with you. At least we should do that.
Not against signs.
And how do we ask that signs be posted? Can this committee do it if there's agreement here? Could we ask? Or what's the process? I don't know.
believe that's probably traffic safety.
That's Justin's. It's always.
Yeah.
It's more of a quality of life issue.
Yeah,
Well, you can say it's safe safety. There's asthma, there's strokes, and there's,
Yeah, that's why I kind of feel like it's
yeah.
DPW and public health.
Art,
we need a school department, if it's parents, it's.
Well, anyway, I'd be in favor of it
Yeah,
if
yeah,
others
yeah.
are.
I
But
think in that particular area, my personal view is that the bike lane needs to just avoid that area entirely.
Pollard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and avoid the, parking side of the road.
you could go near the center strip.
I just drove by there today on the way here and there,
Oh, yeah.
it's on both sides.
Well,
Both sides
that's
of the
unusual.
street.
There's a major event
Oh,
tonight.
is there a major
Oh,
event?
gosh,
Okay.
I mean, there's hundreds of cars
Yeah.
tonight, but that's unusual. I don't know what's there, but some all
Okay.
school.
So
But
what do you
yeah,
think about the order of operations?
yeah, so I think we need to. Somehow come up with our list, I guess as a committee, for. The areas in town, like, I don't know, if individual members or like. Or you wanted to come up with that, or
Which list are we talking about? Sorry.
for,
The
High
bike
priority
network.
bike network?
Okay.
I think that it may be more appropriate for the committee members rather than me to work on it, because I'm not actually a member of the committee.
But is it appropriate for us, and aside from like DPW to? Should we? Just, I guess, yes, okay.
Do we have
Yeah,
any
collaboration,
data?
it's-
collaboration, sure.
Do we have
Well,
any
that's-
data on where bikes go?
Strava, there's heat maps, there's a lot of data. out there.
So why don't we gather that and then we can discuss it?
I mean, I have like a list, of,
I think your approach is,
Streets.
is a good one. It's very practical.
Yeah.
Here's the spine, here's,
Yeah.
the half a dozen roads that relate to it that people will use. And on the small roads, we're not gonna have.
yeah, so I've looked at it. Town, like the town pretty much,
And he
and
bikes
there's,
everywhere.
16 streets for bike lanes. It's 10 miles of bike lanes in that list. All of the roads are over 30 feet wide, meaning.
Yep.
Essentially, you could narrow it down to 2 10-foot lanes and 5-foot bike lane. It's not necessarily the end product.
Right.
Having an on-street bike lane, but I think. Working towards putting some of them on the ground as soon as possible. For visibility and for allocating the space for future bigger projects, I think that's. The best
Yeah.
start for us.
Sounds like you have a great start.
I
to
do
it.
have a great start. I think it's pretty great,
Why
yeah.
don't you share it with us electronically?
And then we
um,
can discuss
And,
it.
yeah,
Or you-
does that make sense?
Can you do
You
that?
could even assign like a smaller group to flesh it out if you feel like it's ready, just send
Okay.
it, but, you know.
Can you do that?
Tim,
Yeah,
Shane has a.
Shane, go ahead.
You're mute, Shane.
Usually,
Sorry, I put my hand up for something else, but we're off that topic, so I can come back to it.
Okay.
What's the issue, Gus? That,
Well, we
And-
can't have discussions among ourselves.
right,
Right.
yeah, and there's.
But you
If
could-
you don't
you
have
could-
a quorum, you can.
You could get 2 or 3 people
No,
to
but
work
you
on
can't
it.
do it
You can't have
offline.
like an offline.
You can't have an offline conversation.
Yeah.
no. If he
you have a
sends
little
around,
Subcommittee, you can do
if
that.
You
he
could do
sends
something.
around the list to all of us, we can't, through you, give comments on it?
You can give me comments, we can't have a group discussion.
Right.
Okay.
And you
so-
can't reply all.
You can't reply all, you can't involve a quorum.
So it's either you go 1-to-1, like everybody goes back to one
All right.
person,
Well,
or you take a small group, like 3 people.
okay,
And you say, why don't you guys go work on this, flesh it out, come
And
back
bring
and
it
give a
back to the
recommendation.
quorum.
well, let's
and
do
then
one of those two,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
that's the way to move it along.
There's. When I created this list, there's. On-street lanes, there's off-street trails, which. Might be good for you.
Yeah.
And then talk a little bit. To Tyler about. These bicycle boulevards, which is basically using. Streets that are inherently low volume, low speed. kind of designated them as a safe route to bike through without
Mhm.
necessarily adding
Mhm,
significant
mhm.
infrastructure, creating lines.
Maybe signage though.
Signage, certainly. You know, maybe controlling volume, there's kind of a lot of different traffic calming
Mhm.
things that could be done on a. Low volume, low speed street that could be added to the bike network.
Do
Do you have a proposal that we could look at? As a starter?
I mean, so. Like, an example for a street, I think we talked about Manning Street, right?
Mhm.
A little bit. Manning Street, the select board, I think when the select board. Heard this proposal for Webster Street, they mentioned, why aren't bikes going to Manning Street
Mhm.
where there's less traffic? So you could take that Manning Street, which crosses the town just like the other Highland Ave and, Webster Street, and, maybe start with signage. Marking it as a bicycle boulevard or a neighbor way. I think you can also just we could do our own branding,
Mhm.
calling it something that is specific to us.
From
From
bike way.
Nina Bike, or I think Karis would call it a basketball hoop street, she always. Example. But it's true, and that, those streets, we talked about removing sidewalks, the same thing as how can you make the street safe to kind of without. All this additional bike lanes or moving the curb. So Manning is one. Fair Oaks Park is
Mhm.
probably a street that you would need to do nothing on.
Right.
To change that into a bicycle boulevard, you could probably just stripe that on the map and call it part of your bike
Right.
network already. You have to stop every. So many feet, and so there's not a lot of room for cars to gain speed, and it's a very comfortable street to be on. The bike down, maybe there are some additional treatments you could put on it, but you don't have to do it all at once. And, you kind of flush that out, so. There are some that are easy, like Fair Oaks Park, Manning's probably like medium, and then there's. Maybe some connections in town where the roads are too narrow. To add bike lanes and the traffic's too high, and it would be a complicated project. That would be maybe like Mark Tree Road.
Mhm.
No hiding, maybe.
No, wait,
Avoiding those
for
areas.
sure. Yeah, you'd have to somehow. Reduce the volume. On the road, and then try to reduce the speed of the cars going, so you basically take. One of those roads and make them a local road, so a through road, allowing.
We are undertaking a pretty significant road reconstruction project on Mark Tree.
Right.
But it won't change the cross section of existing. Sidewalk, it'll change the road profile a little bit, but we're not. Adding. Bike lanes and. Bump outs, things like that.
So getting back to your list, I just want to get very practical here. If you share it through Tyler and we all respond to Tyler, is that a way to move this forward?
Yes,
Yeah, please.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
no, and it's public.
And that'll be a starting point.
Instead of like. A subcommittee or, a couple of you talking, is that what you mean?
Well, that's fine too. Either way is okay with me.
Or both.
Well, it might be where if he's done a lot of thinking on it, we might actually be pretty close.
Yeah, sounds like he has done.
Yeah.
work on it.
I will. Okay, I'll send it out to everybody, I think you can respond to me individually.
Yeah,
your comments
You
on
should
it.
go through him. I think. I think.
why is that?
I think you can go back to the chair, just as long as there's no back and forth.
Okay,
As long as I don't share anyone's comments with other
Okay.
people until
Yeah.
we get to a meeting.
Yeah.
I
I
see.
just don't wanna, I don't wanna like. Collect everything and then kind of be like, here we go, this is what we're doing.
You wanna be the
everyone,"
gauge.
you know,
No, I think we would end up having a discussion in the next meeting or two.
Right.
Public.
So if we can do it directly with Paul.
I'm gonna,
with,
I'm gonna send it out. To everybody, and then maybe you can,
Just don't
Make your-
reply all.
don't
Okay.
reply all, I'll send it to you
Yeah.
individually.
and we reply to you.
give me your comments,
Okay.
additions or whatever,
Right.
and I will. We'll
Yep.
talk about.
And,
everyone's
and
comments.
does your list have this distinction? You mentioned like primary routes, for bikes and.
No.
No, okay.
It's simply just.
It's the 16 streets that you think
16
are good
streets, I think,
bike routes,
yeah.
okay.
it's not necessarily, my list isn't necessarily route based, it's mostly, I looked at the width of the road.
Right,
And that it made sense that there could be a bike lane there. Not necessarily
about,
a route plan. So you
Connectivity
can
or anything.
maybe
okay,
look at that and decide if that.
Yep.
Makes sense, but there are so few streets in Needham anyways, that
Right.
if you do like a Highland Ave, it takes care of the entirety of Needham that way. And if you take care of Great Plain Ave, it takes the entirety of Needham that way. So I don't think it's a huge project to
right,
do it, but.
Right.
Okay, connecting the dots with.
Yeah.
Connecting the dots are big, and I think that, especially on, when we see this list, when I saw it last year, I looked at the streets that were 32 feet. Great Plain Ave, between Harris Ave and Eastdale Road, the lanes are like 15 feet wide. The travel lanes from Harris Ave all the way to the Dedham line, which is extremely wide.
Right.
It's way out of spec for what's
Right.
supposed to be, but so the bike lane makes sense there for reasons other than connectivity.
Mhm.
um,
okay.
stuff like that.
Yeah. And when we say Highland, we continue it to Chestnut, correct? I mean, Chestnut's on your list, yeah, yeah.
For sure. And, like, a lot of these projects, I think, can be done pretty. Inaccessible.
Part of Chestnut has them now, it would just be extending it to meet up with. whatever.
I think between the rail trail, basic, or
Yeah,
between
Yes.
Junction and
That's what doesn't
the
happen.
downtown,
right.
which is, I think, important because, as we do the downtown project, it will kind of fit in there.
so, related to this, I would say there are probably several, I mean, there's different types of cyclists, right? So there's the kids on their bikes. I think that's one piece that needs to be thought of in terms of where they're going and how do we make sure that that can be done safely on bikes. But then there's the road cyclists, and Needham is a mecca for road cyclists, right? There are thousands of cyclists that go through Needham every month.
Is that true? I didn't know.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, they start
South Street.
in
Yeah, South
Kendrick Street, they come down Greendale, they go down South Street,
Yeah.
some go up Great Plains, some go.
And then out to
up
Dover and
Centrals,
Sherburne.
there's a variety of different routes.
Medfield.
In packs too.
Yeah, and if you see like the Strava heat maps, you'll see like all of the roads being.
Why is that?
Because there's so many beautiful roads in Dover and Natick and Medfield that are nice country roads with low traffic.
Beautiful biking.
But we're the gateway, so if you're coming from Wellesley, Newton, Waltham, Dedham, you cut through here to get to those roads.
Gotcha.
And one flag that I have is that there are some high exposure intersections. Where as a cyclist, you're a sitting duck. And, I think of where St. Seb's, Great Plain and Greendale intersect is one of those.
Yep.
And then where Great Plain and Central intersect is another one of those, and, there might be a few others,
Yeah.
but. I wonder if we could somehow flag those on the bike map as something that need.
Yeah.
Longer range thinking.
Yeah.
How does-
So, as an aside, both of those are going to be, redesigned in the next couple of years. Great Plain and Central is actively under redesign right now.
Great Plain, that's Central.
And
Well, that should include the perspective of bicycle safety.
It's in the capital plan, it says. Because it doesn't fit all modes, that's the reason why it's being redesigned, so I assume it's gonna be
Yeah.
adding all different modes.
All intersection improvement projects will involve some element of pedestrian, bike and ped. and safety enhancements.
and what's his name, who did the street design scope, also cited the data of the accidents with bikes and so forth. And so that data we have, and the other one, I believe, is South Street and Dedham Ave. is it?
Dedham Ave or
Yeah.
Central or.
Yeah.
Charles River.
That one had, I think, almost the most of, but anyway,
Yeah, that one is also, we're working on that one.
Yeah.
Okay,
The list that I've created is mostly focused on like all ages and ability type users, so it's not necessarily for sport, like sports cycling and doesn't really kind of fit that mold, sort of what we see. A lot of those roads aren't wide enough for bike lanes and they're kind of rural roads.
South Street's a great example.
Correct, yeah.
South Street's like, I don't know how you solve South Street, but I do think those intersections are opportunities to consider new ways of thinking. You know, before I joined this committee, I was talking to Tim about whether or not the town is considering roundabouts
Mhm.
to replace intersections,
are.
given that they have obvious safety benefits, but also allow traffic to flow smoothly. So-
One of the main proposed options for the Greendale by the school, by St. Seb's is a roundabout.
That's great. Any possibility of doing the central one too,
Central at
central and Great Plain?
So that one, they're looking at actually some takings to allow us to fit more infrastructure in there for safety enhancements, but I don't believe there's enough room for a roundabout. That's what I was told.
Yeah, we've looked at that a few times, Tyler, and it's
Gonna
just,
host
we
right
don't,
at the-
we don't have the right of way there for that intersection to get a roundabout. We've brought it up a couple different times to a couple different vendors, and the conclusion's been that it's just too tight to put a roundabout there.
You have two historic houses that are very close to the street.
This was Greendale and what?
We still have,
Central and.
we still
No,
have
no.
the historical house.
The
Say
one
again?
that we're looking at a
Jeff
roundabout,
Holland's
that's
house and the next
Greendale
house down.
and Great Plain.
Oh, Great Plain, okay,
Yeah.
sure.
I was thinking
Then-
once, two in that got knocked down.
Tim,
Did
if
you
I
have-
could jump in on the.
Go ahead,
On
yeah,
the
sorry.
bike lane discussion or the bike route
Yeah.
discussion as well. Just, I think Steve kind of alluded to it already. What my suggestion to the group would be is that as you distribute this, everyone feeds the comments back to Tyler, and that you have this as a running agenda item. And that perhaps at the next meeting, the group can come back, look at the comments, see what makes sense and what doesn't, and then go from there. One thing to think about too is that on some of these streets, if we're looking at marking the streets to actually put a bike lane on the street, there's also the issue of having to get parking restrictions as well. So it's not as simple. Just want to keep those things in mind, that it's not just as simple as identifying a street and saying, hey, this is a bike route. If we're going to mark it out and actually stripe it, those sort of things, then that also means that we're going to have to enforce parking and take parking away. So there'll definitely need to be neighborhood meetings and those kind of things as we progress. I think it's a worthy thing to do, but just something for the group to be mindful of as we move forward with it.
Yeah, I think actually you had suggested I look at the Newton's traffic council that you maybe you're part of Newton, and they have a policy. The traffic council votes on whether or not to remove or add parking. It was a comment that was made the first time we spoke
Yeah.
about this, was that parking would be removed.
Yeah.
And they have a council that basically you go in front of, and either it's brought from someone from the DPW or maybe a resident. And so DPW may come forward with a bike lane, and the council will vote on whether or not they agree to remove the parking based on, you know, the connectivity of the bike lane, the reasonable alternative parking for that specific road, and other factors before they kind of vote on whether or not they remove parking. So parking is definitely a discussion
Mhm.
when we go through this list. A lot of them, I think there are ways. Yes, you're gonna lose parking in some places. I think there are other opportunities to add parking. And there are ways to design bike lanes or bike infrastructure to maintain parking. Those neighborhood greenways or bike boulevards, there's no, you don't touch any parking,
Right.
it leaves it out there.
Mhm.
Newton's kind of unique.
Absolutely.
We don't have overnight parking. Newton's a little bit different. Their residents don't have driveways, and you know, parking is you know, part of their neighborhood and their parking permit situation. We don't have overnight parking here, so when we talk about parking, really what we're talking about most of the time is the ability to have a car outside of your house, a certain time of day. So it's a little bit different, but definitely, we'll definitely consider that and definitely
Service.
get through it. Yeah, there's,
Absolutely, and I believe the mechanism that we have here in Needham for that would be the TSC, if I'm not mistaken.
I actually think that this body would recommend to the select board. But maybe, because, TSC is a safety committee. When this is more of a policy change. That's my view, but maybe.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd have to get some clarification on that. It's interesting, we don't really have a parking regulation committee so we
So there's a
have to
parking
flesh that a
committee,
little bit.
the parking committee doesn't really adjudicate. They pretty much run the permit system.
So just a point of clarification, I thought earlier we decided that we'd send comments back directly to Tim. Shane just recommended everything goes through Tyler. I'm agnostic on this, but I'd like clarity.
It's fine to go back to Tim.
Yeah.
I may have just missed that, James, so I apologize.
I will likely
if I
discuss it
confused the
with
group.
Tyler too,
Okay,
probably.
okay, I just want to be clear, that's all.
Everything.
It'll go through you, I guess. Great, thanks.
When you put everybody on the BCC line, we can't accidentally reply all.
Okay.
Oh, that's true too. That's a good
I
idea.
was in the meet, I asked what would happen at if there's a mistake and someone replies all that, they told me not to tell anybody. That's what town council said.
Just don't continue
Just-
the conversation.
yeah.
The committee on
Just stop.
redundancy committee has
Yeah.
good operating rules on this stuff.
I will send it out what I have.
Great.
It's a rough draft, obviously,
yeah.
like, but you please make your comments and
Okay.
thank. Good. We'll reconvene next time. Thank you, Shane. Okay. And so the next item on the agenda is an updates with the transportation master plan draft state.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure if we were gonna have revisions in time for the meeting, but I did receive some from Travis today. With some updates to the budget as well.
Oh, I didn't see those.
So that can be, I just got them
Okay.
like earlier. But I haven't had a chance to review them yet. I have been in discussion with our GIS coordinator about the proposed budget and the scope, everything like that. His comment is that GIS is integral to the data and analysis of the entire project. So the line for the GIS addition component of the project. He said seems very high. Ridiculously high.
The budget for it.
Yes.
The
Wow.
128,
We thought it was low, right?
Yeah, I certainly did, but I'm not a GIS person. That's good news if it's,
He said that the task should only account for pushing the data to an ArcGIS online or similar environment. So the GIS cost should be baked into the rest of the project. So essentially, he's saying that they're either the line item should be reduced significantly, or they should just build the cost into the project and have the GIS as a sort of the one of the like we're not paying for a report, we're not paying for you to do the work and produce a report, right? So he's saying we wouldn't pay for them to do the work and then export the data because it shouldn't be as heavy of a lift as he's seeing it as equivalent to like generating a report. So
But
why
it
is it
should
so?
still be in the spec.
Still be in the spec, but he's
Not
saying
in
the
the budget.
cost should not be, like, he's saying that the cost seems very high considering that it's really a different. form of a report of the data.
That makes sense.
Well, but it's a lot more than that, isn't it? Because we want this to be interactive and used by citizens, by residents, by
But
everybody.
the GIS system itself should be interactive and used by citizens.
Right. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
he's
I
the
don't-
expert, so he thinks 14,200 is too high.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
We just need to make sure it's specified that that it happened, that's all, right?
Yeah, so, I'll talk further to engineering, but
Line item is that?
his view,
It's under task
his view is that it's.
5.3, yes, okay.
High for what we would be getting, but I don't know enough about that to really have, to know if he's right or not.
Yeah, I wonder if there's,
Yeah, I'm a little uneasy about that as well, just, the former number didn't seem outrageous. Is there some way of making sure that the town is sure that it knows what it's getting? It's not just translation or reformatting data, I think.
well, the updated task 5, and I believe the new fill is in yellow, is that correct? In his redraft. That does specify much more than was there before, at least. And if the GIS person has seen this updated version and thinks all of this can be done for under 14,000. I mean, I would be more comfortable. If he hasn't seen this, then I'm not comfortable. And I don't know if he's looked at this or not.
No, so because I sent him, you're right, because I only got the revision, recently, he didn't.
Okay.
Look at that one yet, so.
So maybe run it by him again.
I
and
will
just
run it by him
like-
again, basically, he responded to my email today, and then like, so
Yeah.
I didn't have enough time to like really hash it out with him. So more to come on that. I think that what I am primarily interested in right now is how are we gonna pay for this work?
Is there not
Yes.
an article or this isn't being worked into the budget for the April town meeting? May
So.
May town meeting?
So it's. We didn't put in something specifically for it.
So typically, something like this big would probably go through the select board and they would add an article. If it's outside of the budget already. If you're not putting it into the budget next year, it would have to be appropriated through a town meeting article.
Yeah,
But wasn't there thought of applying for grants for this? I
we can apply for grants, we can.
thought that was the original idea.
Better.
I think that,
It's more of a strategy question than like, I don't,
yeah, I know I'd asked Paul, but maybe like because it is a Vision Zero document, like the MPO has like all this money, they have SS4A money. Can they, because it's kind of seated in Vision Zero, does that qualify for that funding for planning?
So we did submit an SS4A application for the downtown pilot.
Right.
A few weeks ago.
But can like the MPO, will they give us some of their funding that they already have from previous allotments for?
I'm not sure how that works. I can talk to them and see what they might recommend.
They have,
I just-
they have a bucket of money that they have, and I don't know if it's already allocated or.
Yeah, I mean, we can pursue local funding, or we can pursue a grant, or that's why I'm asking,
So typically, I can tell you what we did a couple years ago when we got our consultant, which we paid like $50,000 for. We recommended it to the select board as a line item to be added into the annual budget. Didn't make the annual budget, then we had to go through the special town meeting process, and we actually got dinged by the finance committee for going that route. So I would say that if you, unless you're sure you can get a grant or another source of funding,
I'm not.
I would probably propose that you put forth a proposal to the select board as soon as possible to see if they can get it into the annual budget for fiscal 25.
Well, that's, I mean, I've seen that document is done.
Yeah,
I don't know what the process is to add something after it, you know, I mean, it's gone through the whole process already.
we talking about the
25 or
The annual
26?
town meeting FY 26
I'm
budget.
saying
It has not-
internally in town it
internally,
has.
yes, it's not
Right.
closed though, and it won't be
Okay.
closed until
February.
February.
Well, let's do both, in my opinion. I mean, I agree with you, but let's look for grant money too. I mean, and if we get it, we can not bother with the town and.
Right, but you need to
save the
be in
town.
the process for the town.
We need to be. in
You
the
need to get.
We need to get the select board.
You need
on
to get the
board.
select
Right, no,
board.
I'm saying, let's do both.
Yeah.
Let's do that, but don't have that stop us from looking for grant money.
So they referred this
That makes sense.
to this committee, the select board referred this to this committee as something to take action on? Is that what I'm understanding or no?
We made recommendations.
We got a grant, we got a technical assistance grant, and that's what was the, sort of the impetus for this whole project. Because, we were tasked with goals related to this project, and then essentially, when we started meeting, we were like, okay, this, you know, there's an opportunity here to ask for, technical assistance. We could put together a sort of foundational document that we can use in the committee moving forward, and so we weren't provided any budget, we weren't provided, specific direction to create this guide.
I think it was part of our charge is to come up with, make recommendations to the select board for a comprehensive transportation. plan. So I think this document is our comprehensive transportation plan. I think that's kind of the
Yeah, well,
foundation of
it
it.
was kind of vague as to what a comprehensive transportation plan was.
But you sort of coalesced around this idea of what Newton has, that was one of the things that I think you
Yeah,
referenced.
yeah.
Yes, and you feel like you need an external consultant to get us to that point.
So we have, so the, MAPC, has produced this scope of work. And then we have to actually put out an RFP
To get something
secure the
to work on
consultants.
it,
Yeah.
yeah. So
I
would say,
funding for that.
Yeah.
Which is through the select board.
yeah, so I think you would report back to the select board, here's what we did. Here's what we've learned, here's what we think the next step is, this is what we think it's going to cost. We are investigating various ways of funding it, but one of the things we think in order to make progress is we would recommend you put it in the budget for 26. So that we can begin work if we're unable to
Okay,
secure.
yeah, I'll talk to Karis tomorrow and see what our options are.
She knows the process.
She knows the process, but we are, we should have had this discussion a month ago.
Yeah, because early October, I spoke to Karis yesterday about a different item and she said that this was all kind of complete.
Yeah.
I think she said October 4th.
We reviewed the revisions, we reviewed the final version earlier this week, like end of last week.
It might be too late, but it's never,
But it was more,
better to ask.
it's like that's the internal deadline for us to
Mhm.
submit our requests.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that the book is completely closed.
Okay.
Right, because FinCom's gonna go through its whole process in
Yeah.
November and December. Which will eventually make its way back to the warrant article in February.
Yeah,
They can put a placeholder.
Could put a placeholder for it, yeah.
I haven't submitted the operating budget yet, but this isn't really.
No,
it's
it's fine.
expense.
But the framing you mentioned, Stephen, I think is the right one, that we were tasked with coming up with this. Here's where we are, and the next step is gonna cost $125,000 to $130,000. And in order for this committee to continue its work and make progress on what the select board asked, we need.
Yeah, and this could be a letter from you to the select board chair, co-chair and That way you kind of go on both fronts if you're going through repairs.
Um. Any thoughts on the highlighted items?
I thought he did a good job reflecting the changes we suggested. I'd be interested in seeing his new budget, which I don't think was included in the version that you sent out yesterday anyway. Well, if it was, there's no change. I think it's identical to the previous one, I believe.
So the one that I
Well, it's
sent
slightly
out,
different.
yeah, it's slightly different. It's,
13.
I think he uses it a different hourly rate.
Actually, there's only one difference. It's in task 5, it's $2,400 less. And that's on the GIS actually.
The line item that says deliverable 5.3.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's 14.2, it used to be 16.6, so I don't know if that reflects what you just heard from your GIS
Yeah, I
person.
mean,
or-
I don't, I'll talk to him. I'll talk to him tomorrow.
Yeah.
See what he thinks, but I don't know if that's
Okay.
gonna change his thinking on it.
We had, at least I had raised some suggested modifications to the budget last time. I thought the task 1 was way over budget and not enough on task 3, but anyway.
Yeah, I've been trying to get together with engineering and
Mhm.
I'll talk to them. As soon as I can, see if they have some thoughts on this, because
I
I
mean,
need to corner them and or
Yeah.
have to answer my questions.
means, one of my thoughts was that, 30 hours on the goals and so forth seems a little much, given that I think the goals are pretty clear already.
Okay, so more to come on that. All within my usual updates. So there's not a lot of updates. Downtown redesign, we had a table at the Harvest Fair, where we collected some feedback from passerby, and it was really like a visioning board kind of session. Tim was there for a minute. Where, so we're kind of in the data collection phase of things. They're going to be doing some survey work. They're gonna be doing some traffic analysis. We forwarded them some information that was already collected as part of the traffic analysis that was done alongside the MBTA communities impact report. So still in the pre-design phase on that, but be looking to move to more into the design phase of the new year. Bottleneck grant, that's referring to the signal improvements in the center of town. So we're close to having a final plan set from the consultant. That was a grant that we received. We'll have to bid out that project. The changes that are proposed essentially amount to improved detection, improved signal phasing to accommodate some problems we noticed with pedestrian signals on the how they interact with the train, where the pedestrian phase is getting skipped.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
people
stood-
always talk.
I've stood there for 10 minutes
Yeah.
talking to Katie from across the street.
So that should be addressed, and then, the only like substantial change is, if you're heading north on Dedham Avenue and you hit the intersection, with, Great Plain. The current, left turn lane will be turned into a left and straight lane, I believe.
So you can go straight up to
Up Highland.
up Highland.
That
Yeah,
would be 2 lanes going straight, because there's, right now they're straight.
there's a lane configuration change at that portion. but
Yeah, I
I'll
think
have to take a
we
look.
discussed before, I think we mentioned that both lanes will be for left turns.
That's what it was.
And then the right.
The right lane is a left turn and straight.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah. The right lane is a left turn and straight instead of just a straight.
You mean the center lane, because there's also a right lane,
Well,
It
there's
goes
slip
right.
lane.
The center lane,
slip lane, yeah. okay,
the
yeah.
center lane. The
Um,
center lane will be, will have a left as well as a straight.
And when are they gonna do that? When are they gonna strike that? When will they strike that?
So we have to bid it out first and we don't have the design yet, but I think we're planning to. Getting pretty close to the part of the year where we're not really gonna be able to do it, but. Either late fall or early spring.
Is that gonna solve the people going east on Great Plain, taking the left on Highland? Cause they have a very short window there. You often get stuck
There's,
there.
yeah, so
It's a
somebody,
very confusing situation.
Well, it's a very short stick, there's no real left signal there.
Right, you have to wait for them.
And you're not allowed to go around them, because it's a right only lane. And so you can very easily get stuck right there in front of CB.
yeah, somebody mentioned that to me yesterday and, one of the proposed. Fixes for that would be a delayed green.
To allow the people to clear through the intersection before the oncoming traffic.
To allow. Yeah, to allow left turns before the westbound traffic proceeds.
Yeah.
The consultant do counts? Did the consultant do counts?
Counts, yeah,
They did,
yep,
okay.
they did counts.
Mhm.
I'm gonna bring it up to them specifically because I'm not sure if they, anticipated that.
That's also, I think I mentioned it before, kind of. Not compatible with the way that I see the downtown redesign, where we're narrowing everything into
Mhm.
one lane, so.
Yeah.
I think our committee, the downtown redesign group, should meet pretty soon. I think they're gonna put a couple members in and. That maybe we can discuss that kind of going forward, because if there is. We get this grant for the quick build implementation of it, the pilot, yeah, I mean, it seems like it would almost immediately try to probably. To my eyes, remove some of that extra lanes, which we're kind of changing now, so I mean, I'm just.
That's
I don't-
true, but the funding from the grant covers these. improvements. So we're not spending any local funds on these, and the biggest improvement, that isn't really going to be noticed by most people is the detection. That's the upgrade, the upgrade of the detection should help, flows, because currently the detection is not working as it should be, because it's outdated. So
I
that,
mean,
and that's not affected by the changes. Ultimately, the Highland Ave project, or the Great Plain Ave project, won't actually be built for 2 years, 2 or 3 years, so.
But potentially we could be, striping it narrower. I think that adding. That
Or-
left turn movement to that lane is you're adding a conflict to the intersection that doesn't exist now. And so I don't.
You're talking about the left on the Highland?
The left onto Great Plain.
To Great
Right
Plain
there,
going west.
The bottleneck grant, yeah. I see that as creating an additional conflict that doesn't exist now.
Well, there's 2 receiving lanes, it's.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, but, like, it functions, at least, in my opinion, it functions okay, the way it is now, and what the downtown redesign. Like, what the big concept of it is that everything is one lane, so. Like adding an additional movement to something that we have where we might be taking away in the future, I just don't think that makes sense, but
I take your point.
no.
That intersection, as part of the larger project is proposed to be changed. Offset from the other, from Island Avenue. So that would. Change everything anyway,
How
This
would
is-
you offset it?
the slip lane, they're proposing, this hasn't been designed yet, but one of the ideas was to. Create like a T by shifting the Dedham Ave approach towards the slip lane, removing that center area. And just having traffic, you have to turn at a 90-degree angle left to right, offset from Island Avenue, or Island
To
Avenue.
get onto Dedham Street,
As you're leaving Dedham to get onto Great Plain, left to right.
Northbound.
So you're
Northbound.
saying you couldn't continue straight onto Highland? Is that what you're saying?
You would have to turn left and then right.
Ah, no, interesting.
So, the Bottleneck Grant Consultants did a bunch of modeling that I can't personally explain.
Yeah.
All I know is that when they ran the model with the various different changes that were proposed, there was a slight increase in the level of service at the intersection when they add the, left turn for existing conditions. I understand that we may be moving away from that lane configuration in the near future, but we're also not expending our own money to make these changes, so if it can improve outcomes in the medium term, then I think it's worth pursuing.
Do they think that that is a safer movement or just gonna improve level of service? I mean, it's a bottleneck grant, but you know.
One of their charges is to look at intersection safety, but the model was accounting for level of service. Yeah, so we haven't, I'll talk more with them about what we discussed today and see what their thoughts are. And then tip, I think we kind of discussed that quite a bit, but essentially, the most recent development is that we've been talking with Boston Region MPO, and they have indicated to us that the project is would be very attractive for their tip program, which is basically in parallel with the MassDOT tip program. The process is the same, but we might be able to get a funding commitment earlier than we would using going through the MassDOT trying to get onto their program. The process remains the same. But the types of projects that are funded through one track or the other are type of project with the relation to bicycle and pedestrian safety, the sort of the Vision Zero aspect. It makes it more appropriate for MPO. So we had a meeting with them and they're basically like encouraging us to apply. Even though we're not going to have 25% design submission, they want us to apply this fall. And that they can work with us to potentially get us put on for fiscal year 30, which is the end of their current plan.
Is it,
we'll be looking at it from above
is it,
It's 2025 in January.
or below.
do you get, is it either MassDOT funding or NPO funding, or is it? Both? One of the-
So they're separate tracks. What the NPO person told me is that we're less likely to be funded overall, and we're less likely to be funded in a we're not gonna beat 2030 by going through the MassDOT process.
Right.
So I know it sounds like a long time away, but it is potentially the first indication that we could actually get on a plan and have a
Gotta
commitment.
think long term.
And then we can use the funding commitment to leverage for further funding.
Yep.
So.
And that's what-
2030 would be here before we know it.
But that's what the tip is always that long, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the way,
that's the
that-
program.
yeah.
Pick off the second 250 years of the US.
All right, so now we're on to the semi-annual joint meeting of the transportation committees. When to hold, the format, what to cover. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
When do we have to make that decision?
So our charge is that we're supposed to do this meeting in the fall.
September.
What it actually said was September, but I think they won't, dissolve the committee if we do it in the fall.
Our first one was late as well because we
Yeah.
met late, so.
So what was the feedback on the format and the whole meeting we did last year for the first one? Did you get any
I think
feedback?
It was good. I believe there was a competing event that night and
Yeah.
that's kind of.
It wasn't well attended, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
But just to clarify, that meeting is supposed to have a different purpose than this meeting, so the content will be a little different.
I think the charge says it's to align. My computer died, so. I
It's
have a
like
charge
art and construction plans.
planning between the three committees, which is the
Uh-huh.
art committee.
Yeah.
The rail trail committee and the transportation safety committee.
Right, right.
So I see this one as more of just like a conversation, I guess, between the three and what you're planning for the next year and whether we have comments to each other on that. That's how I see it. I don't know if anyone else had any.
Last time it was a presentation. I
Yeah.
believe,
We did a presentation.
it
last
was a
time, yeah.
presentation, I believe.
We were a new committee at that time. I think, probably our next one, which is supposed to be sometime in the spring, is really
So
maybe more
in
about
February.
in February. So, that's pretty early.
Yeah, so it doesn't actually say, it just says, the purpose of the joint meetings is to align activities, projects, and planning initiatives to facilitate public awareness of current and planned public works projects.
So as an example, if we're working on a pipe. Wouldn't that have to sync up somewhat with the rail trail committee? Wouldn't they want to know
mean, we
where
wanna know,
where
but-
those roads are gonna be and?
Yes, but it's a little different because the rail trail is a specified route and we're talking about the whole town.
But doesn't the rail trail envision eventually making its way to Newton?
Absolutely,
And so wouldn't you want to know what roads
absolutely. I
people will
mean,
have to be on, assuming that we're not gonna rip up the MBTA
right,
tracks?
right. It is clear what roads that would be, I believe. It's initially connecting to Chestnut. And that's what I was talking to Karis about yesterday. And then up Chestnut, through Great Plain, and then up to Highland, all the way to the light at the temple and
Webster.
Behind the Muzzy?
and
Oh, Gould.
no, go up to Webster and then down Webster to the rail, the rail right of way. And then the community way would start there, behind Muzzy to the river, to 128 in the river, and then that pedestrian bridge that's been talked about in the community way study. So that's the route. I don't think there's
There's nothing.
any mystery about it, whether it can happen, and whether it can happen in our lifetime is a whole nother.
Any continuing discussion of multi-use on that trail? Multimodal?
The committee considered it and the consultant considered it. It more than doubled the cost with very little value because of where the connections would be. In other words, multimodal doesn't get you to the Highland T.
Not in the short term, but
or-
ultimately.
Or the Heights station either. So I mean, our recommendation was to not do, I mean, they looked at two basic scenarios, one with a shuttle bus and one without. And the ultimate recommendation for a variety of reasons, cost and kind of value of a connection was to not do the shuttle.
Should this be the conversation
None.
that we have at our joint transportation meeting?
Sounds like we're doing it now.
Yeah, right.
It feels like a topic,
I think
it feels like a
this
good topic.
This is how I envision it, to
Uh-huh.
have the conversation between us,
Uh-huh.
all of our committee members. Attended and having these conversations about how it works into our long-term plan down here. So, like, also with the Transportation Safety Committee, they have, funding, for projects and like, how is that gonna tie into our design guide and, like, are they doing things that are working towards those
Yeah.
standards and,
And in the capital plan, I saw that the safety committee, I think doubled its budget this year, right? Up to 100?
Yes.
So, yes,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
true. But that's, then you're gonna depend on graphics too. You know, if you wanna have a conversation, you cannot just talk the way we talk,
Mhm.
you know,
Well, you have to present it,
you have to
yeah.
show something, so then we're back to, you know, what are we pointing at?
Yeah.
I'm just,
Maybe we should
Sure,
decide
sure.
on when this is happening.
yes.
Well, it's already mid-October, so it's
How
not gonna.
late can it happen?
Yeah. Our next meeting is in like
Two
2
months,
weeks,
yeah.
so.
Yeah,
Our
It can't
next
be
meeting.
our next meeting is in.
Well, why don't we discuss that then? Since it's already almost 9
Well,
o'clock.
I do think we need to select a
date.
date, or at least a tentative date. Because it's not gonna be much more than a month
Do
away.
you think December is enough time to?
I think that's late myself, but I don't
Okay, do you
know.
wanna-
The week before Thanksgiving, is that?
So our next meeting is November 6th,
Mhm.
which is, and then, so this would be like a week or two after that.
Yeah.
November 4th.
Is that enough time to prepare from our perspective? And if it is, why not?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, there's not a lot of planning probably needs to go in, maybe, but you know, more of a discussion,
I mean,
I see it more of a
yeah, I'm
discussion.
still a
so-
little bit unclear of your vision, but we don't have to resolve that now. We
Yeah.
can just.
So if I could make a comment, I think that probably one of the ideas around having this meeting in September was to help influence the budget for the
Mm.
upcoming fiscal year. To see if you could make some decisions, prioritize certain things collectively. That's kind of missed, right, for this year, so maybe one key topic could be how do you get aligned for next year? What are the?
And select a date now for next year.
Yeah, but I mean, is it seriously, like, how are we gonna work together as
Yeah.
committees? How are we gonna plan ahead? How are we gonna be ready by September 2025?
Right,
To sit down and say, yeah, these are collectively what we think the town should focus on, and it makes, you know, progress on these 3 goals.
right.
And you probably need to keep it like that.
And it may
now.
cost X,
And it
Y, or
probably
Z.
costs extra,
Yeah.
exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But you could also have the general discussion about like some of the things that are of interest to the big committees, like what are you guys what are your priorities, what are our priorities, how do we start working together?
Right, that's kind of what we did at the first meeting, but just at a high level,
Yeah.
and yeah,
We just
That
started,
gives-
we kind of gave a brief overview of.
yeah, of each of the
And what was
committees.
done this year and let the public look at the interaction.
Right.
So they know what we're talking about.
So might I suggest that the two of you come up with a draft agenda for this meeting? Because I also think that the guide should be, you know, the scope for the classification guide should be mentioned at this meeting. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's an important,
Well, it's our
thing.
work for the year.
it's not the only thing, but it's a
But
big
no,
deal.
but it's a
Yeah.
major
It's
piece.
a big
Yeah.
piece.
May I interject quickly?
Yes,
So the.
sorry, we don't have you up, so I can see your hand.
That's okay. Again, I would just recommend that the chairs get together on this because even though this is a joint committee meeting, I don't, if I recall correctly, this meeting isn't led through the mobility planning. It's a joint meeting. So what I would recommend is that the chair sends an email to the chairs of each one of the committees involved to get their thoughts on an agenda and what they would like to discuss for the meeting, because otherwise, if this committee sets the agenda, then we may leave other committees out on ideas and topics they want to discuss. But I do appreciate what Stephen had to say, and I do think that that is the goal, is that that for future meetings, we're talking about what we're doing as far as construction is concerned and those sort of things with those joint meetings. So, but I would think it's a good idea to, as part of this meeting, set the dates for the spring and fall meetings as part of this so that we already have it on the calendars for future years.
Right.
We do have representatives from both committees here as well, so. Both other committees.
I'm not the chair. In fact, I don't even know if we have a formal chair. Stacy is our coordinator, but she's not, I mean, she's a town employee.
I think before our next meeting, which is November 6th, I'll try to reach out to whoever's the chair for your committee, and Justin, and see if they have any input and come back with an agenda.
Great, great.
Just checking
And
the calendar.
the date will be sometime in November.
I think we can pull off like the week before Thanksgiving, but.
November 6th at 7.
The meeting,
All right.
I'm trying to find,
What's a Wednesday?
Yeah.
it
Wasn't
Yeah,
was
that's right.
rescheduled because of that.
Wasn't it the 4th?
And because of election day, right?
Yes.
That's, yeah,
Yeah.
Monday, the 4th.
I have it Monday the 4th.
Yeah,
Monday, the 4th, yeah.
that
so
was the
not
new,
the sixth.
Not
that was not, that was the new date.
What's that?
That was the new date.
Yeah.
The one before.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
for the joint
Yeah, that's
meeting,
in here.
we're talking about the week of the 18th to the 22nd, is that correct? The week before
I
Thanksgiving?
think it's doable, yeah.
Do we want to select a tentative date for that now?
The 18th, Monday, it's our committee's regular meeting.
That would be fine with
November
me,
18th.
but we have to obviously clear it with everybody else and make sure there's no other major meetings that night, and I have no idea if there are.
Yeah. Yeah, let me,
But
I'll be
Monday's
late for the
good.
meeting if that's.
because you got a conflict.
I have a meeting that goes till probably 7:30. I can come, I'll just be late.
Yeah.
I'm only one member, it doesn't matter.
Well, I'll just make sure that there's not, because it was somewhat of an issue last time, see what else is going on in town.
All right, so tentatively the 18th, and it'll be confirmed in the next few days,
Yeah.
hopefully, or
Do we?
certainly by the 6th.
Do we want to do it in the same place?
That seemed like a cavernous meeting place for the 10 or 15 people who were total who were
If
there.
you're talking 10 or 15, you could do the select board chamber, that's got video in it.
Yeah, we could do that. Is
You can get everybody around that table if you've got 15.
is that permitted? We're able to use it.
Sure.
No, but last time at least, I thought we were hoping for an audience and very few people showed up.
I can't imagine that you'll get a big audience.
Especially that time of the year.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So if that's big enough, great.
Okay, we can look into, I'll ask Miles.
Maybe we could do it downstairs, big enough, maybe too.
That is big enough.
He's out.
Island is big enough and the other room is big enough as well.
He meant in this building.
Charles River, you're talking about.
That's also big enough.
So,
And there's seating on there.
Yeah, just keep in mind that you're gonna have several of the committee members sitting at that table, so. You're gonna have to make sure the room's big enough for the committee members to sit at the table.
You can get 15 people
So
in
maybe
those
the-
rooms.
Maybe the Charles River room will be better just because it's the larger table than the select board chambers.
Give us a bigger table.
Alright, sure.
Doesn't matter.
Okay. Any other issues not reasonably anticipated by the chair in the last 48 hours? None. And
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Chair votes aye. Duncan,
Aye.
Paul,
Hi.
Stephen,
Aye.
James,
Aye.
Mo,
Aye.
motion carries. It's you do the adjourn.
Okay, I have
Thank
an
you.
Apple phone question. When I